So Quentin Adam, CEO of Clever Crowd, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. Hello. So, I'm CEO of Clever Cloud, but I am also the chairman of something called the Open Internet Project, which is a lobbyist association to explain that it can be useful to respect the rules of competition in the free market that our friends, the hyperscaler, often forget because they prefer to have monopolistic solutions and be bad at the end for the consumer. So, about open source and why European competitors can be good at open source. First, I want to speak about something which is kind of basic economics, but people try to forget. Software is not the numeric world, is not the virtual world, is not something ethereal, non-knowledgeable than before. It's industry. Often, since I am an entrepreneur, often they say to me that, you work on software, you're working with the virtual world. Like the Matrix, you know. You have the real world, the virtual world, and it's totally disconnected. But when we are on the internet, the money we transfer on the bank system are actually money. The goods we order on e-commerce are actually real goods. And when I'm chatting with Jean-Baptiste over my phone, it's the real Jean-Baptiste that answers to me. Or maybe directly connect a ChatGPT on his phone and it doesn't say to me. But I try to think that it's the real Jean-Baptiste that say hi to me. What I want to say is, often we have considered that the numeric and digital world is a different economy. And we didn't apply the same reflex than on the industry to this economy. And the most problematic here, it does not consider it like an industrial chain of value. It will be less abstract in a minute. When you try to write something here on the screen, you actually need a huge, large pile of software to doing it. You have the driver able to speak through HDMI to the projector, but you have also an operating system, and this operating system is using a font rendering and using and so, a lot of software that actually none of the company I've written from end to end because it's too much complex. It's a huge industrial value on the way. And what's happened to every industrial value on the world is the same thing, that when you have a huge usage of something which is commodity, it's becoming very cheap to produce. Today, when you think about a pen, you know that a pen is just a few cents. You know, it's a commodity. It's just very cheap. And when you're thinking about a computer, nobody is thinking about how we will write some letter on the screen. All the library to write letter on the screen are pretty simple. It's commodity. And it's one of the points that open source have a solution to everywhere, is to say majority of the stuff have to be common to help everyone to produce on top of it. And it's something very interesting because when you create a new stuff on the industry and you add it to your value chain, what actually happens is there is an auto-regulation of the market because you cannot produce too much. You have a factory, you produce stuff. Customer want to introduce that in their value chain, but you cannot produce too much. So they integrate part of you, but all the consumer cannot have it. So your competitor produce different, and the repartition on the industry is quite okay because of the auto-regulation on the market. The problem with software is when we do that, the ability to produce unlimited numbers of the copies of the software made possibility of creating monopolistic situation very quickly. To be on the trending actuality right now, let's speak a little bit about VMware. Oh, it's cool. Let's think a little bit about it. Everyone in the room, because we are from this market, we know that VMware is on a monopolistic situation. Is it on a monopolistic situation on the virtualization market? Absolutely not. We all know that Microsoft, AWS, Google are not using VMware for the virtualization. So they are actually minoritarian on the virtualization. Are they majoritarian on the orchestration market? No. The hyperscalers are way much bigger than that. But they are monopolistic on the market of the cloud providers that actually don't have developer inside them and just want to buy the software outside to resell it because they don't know how to build something, but they want to just reselling like, I don't know, real estate business. And we all know in the room that they are quasi-monopolistic on this market. But this market is pretty non-qualifiable from a legal point of view on the concurrency rights, which is really funny. And when Broadcom bought VMware, it doesn't create a monopolistic state. So, yeah. We all know that will be a problem because Broadcom don't do it for the good reason. And we know that Broadcom is kind of assholes and they will do it like for the bad reasons. But there is no rules on the legal point of view that say, if you are an asshole, you'd have no right to buy a company. There is no rules on that. So at the end, what's happened is the new people on the head of VMware suggest, oh yeah, we will just have the same price, but 12 times to 50 times more, and that's it. And why? Because all the people we are speaking about before, you know, this kind of people who don't have developer inside but just want to have the software and resell it, have created the monopoly of VMware themselves. Because, oh, my friend, my competitor buy this, oh, I will buy this too. Oh, you buy this too, I will buy this too. Oh, you buy this too, oh, I will buy this too. You have a monopoly, yeah, right. And this is possible just because the copy of the software costs absolutely nothing. And that's why open source is mandatory here. Because if VMware was open source, the problem of the monopoly on open source will not be a problem because everyone can be adapting it in his situation and make something fair there. That's why it's important to understand that commodity software have to become open source. Writing letter on the screen have to be open source. Browser have to be open source. Hello, Google Chrome. Browser have to be open source. The server have to be open source. Just remember when we created Linux and everyone said to us like, you will never be able to win against IBM and Microsoft. Do you remember what Microsoft is selling today? I don't think it's NT Workspace Station on Azure. I think it's Linux. So that means that actually open source can be the commodity of creating the future. The problem is the industry of open source in Europe. What is the basic publisher company in Europe making of open source? It's a bunch of 20 to 30 people very convinced by their work that actually creating a software and open source which is actually an open product and not an open source software, but an open product that you can take it and free to use. And when they have put the kids on the bed on the night after have a full day of service, training and support to their customer, they actually commit open source because they are true passionate. This is not the way we fight against hyperscaler. And that's why if we want to beat the hyperscaler with open source, we need to address the way that we have to do open source but not open product. Because we all know that our competitors will be the big IT service company, Capgemini, Accenture, blah, 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 Soprasteria, that will actually take the software open source and sell the training to the big corporate stuff without paying any money. Exactly the same problem that Elastic, Redis, and all these database companies have with AWS, which just taking the value and make more money, which is actually fun because at some point, AWS was making more money with Elastic than Elastic altogether, which is really fun for someone who never write a line of code inside the product. So that's why, for me, right now, open source can be a very huge capacity for the Europe to rocket. But to do that, we need to rethink the way we do open source. We need to do open source, but not open product. So creating huge commodities software, we all contribute together, creating huge capacity to create software which actually good for creating a cloud computing, massive scalable, but not something which is, yeah, you can install it like an hobbyist in your own software in two server, which is actually refurb hardware from 15 years ago on your basement, which is absolutely not the same problem that operating data center. So creating open source for massive scale is not the same problem that satisfying hobbyists. We need to actually reframe the way we do the open source to be successful on that. The question is, does open source will be the solution? Yes, sure. Because commodity software, like commodity on the industry, will strive to become the next achievement on the industry. So what actually happened that all the down layer will be going to open source in the time, and the upper layer of added value will be there that the company will be bidding money and then liberate because it will be more efficient to collaborate to many more at many more companies and then creating an upper layer which happen to build. I don't know if I'm understand about that or not. So that's my point about open source and what we need to do. And for this, we need to explain this to the Commission and the public. Because the problem is some kind of part of the public have listened free software, not free as a speech, but free as a beer, and think, oh yeah, we do have a problem with software, it's expensive. We just have to use free software. And they don't want to pay, and they want to have European company, but liberate everything, which is a problem because we don't have an interest to be like in the competition for the other part. So that's why I think we need to reframe our discourse about our discussion about open source. That's why my point to make a debate around that. So maybe if you have some question about that, it can be interesting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really much appreciate your point about doing open source and not open product. I think that beyond the Commission, and maybe that's also important to more or less educate also our ecosystem, because what you described comes also from, you know, those small companies that want to frame themselves as, okay, we are more open source than you or more free software than you, etc. And sometimes there is we have to some extent in Europe the best free software activist. But my dream is that we manage to collaborate to maybe bring them to be more efficient economic actors. I think that's something where we can work together. Thank you very much.
Maybe if you want an answer about that. From an economical point of view, one of the problems we have in software is a lot of engineers want to be rewarded for real work. They need to sweat to be proud of what they have done, which is, in my humble opinion, something we are wrong about. Because the problem is we need to create assets. If you look at the company, the 10 companies the most wealthy in 2005, it was company from medical, from energy, from bank, from insurance, and Microsoft. But it was only all this company. If you're looking at the company more wealthy in 2020, like 15 years later, you have only company from the software industry. Google, Alphabet, Meta, Apple, Microsoft, Tencent, Tesla, only NVIDIA, only company from the software industry. Why? Because it has been described in the 18th centuries that in the traditional economy you have something that we call decreasance of the return on interest on the growth. More capital you put at work, less it have return on interest. For simple economical reason. If you're taking, for example, renting apartment in Paris, you're taking the best apartment, you have a very large return of interest. If you continue to put capital, you're starting to buy less interesting apartments, so your return on interest is lesser and lesser, and more you put capital, lesser and lesser it becomes. Same thing if you build a factory producing software in a village, for example, you will have the best place and the best resources and the best people. If you're putting more capital, you're starting to hiring morons, you have like less interesting resources, and you have less interesting places. So your interest will grow low. If you're going to digital, in digital, the interest is growing high. More you put more you put capital, more you have return in interest. So if you are Facebook, for example, more you have user, more your action is valuating money. If you are Microsoft, more you're selling Windows, more the company is valuating money, and more you're winning money. So you have here a problem that actually digital work break the capitalist economy. And the point is, if you're thinking about it on open source, when the companies say, I will only win money on training and services, what it takes the traditional economy of paying for people time, which is something non-extensible, and the decrease interest over time things, because more you're putting people, more you have to manage people, less the interest is good, and keep on open source only the stuff which is growing interest rate, which is not good. That's why we need to create open source company that actually are taking back the assets. And that's here where the point is. We need to create the assets, the economical assets that actually taking a huge part of the money that making you able to create large R&D product, that creating what you need to do. You can talk also to Jean-Baptiste, which is working with me. At Clever Cloud, we do some kind of project with semiconductor, with customized semiconductor, or some software that are actually cooked inside Clever Cloud for 8 years. This time of R&D needs you to have people that are not billable to customer, but just taking money for something which is an asset and a growing over time assets. That's actually where we can win the battle over the hyperscaler.